Hoffman. My mentor is Masako Suzuki from the genetics department at Einstein Medical College. She focuses on epigenetics and DNA methylation. My potential project is CPG island methylation effect on transcriptional factors. Some background. CPG islands are stretches of DNA that contain combinations of guanines and cytosines. These regions act as transcriptional regulation through the use of DNA methylation. Proteins called DNA methyltransferases 3A and 3B plant methyl groups on certain cytosine bases followed by guanines. DNMT1 transfers new methyl groups to the opposite strand of DNA. My question is, how do high levels of methylation affect transcriptional factor binding and processivity? What transcriptional factors are affected most? To test this question, I will create multiple different groups using cDNA made with PCR. I will introduce SAM and multiple DNMT proteins to one experimental group and lesser concentration of these factors to another group as an intermediate DNA methylation group. One group will have no methylation and none of these factors will be present. I will then need to isolate certain transcriptional factors, especially those that bind directly to the DNA or even to the CPG islands themselves. I will introduce these 3 to 5 factors that I choose to each of the levels of DNA methylation groups and measure how well they bind by fluorescent tagging or perhaps a different method, and using this to track the movement of these proteins. By seeing how the proteins move along the strands, as well as how likely they are to attach, will give me insight on how levels of methylation affect binding of certain transcriptional factors. This experiment is much more of a basic research experiment than a translational one. Knowing how DNA methylation affects the binding of novel transcriptional factors may provide novel insight on how manipulation of DNA methylation can affect the binding of transcriptional factors, and perhaps the suppression of novel genes commonly transcribed by these transcriptional factors. Thank you for listening.